Hello everyone, this is Lexicon Architect, and for today's commander we're going to be looking at Bartolomé del Presidio, a 2-mana Orzhov legendary creature vampire knight that simply says sacrifice another creature or an artifact, you put a 1/1 counter on it. So the general strategy of this deck is it is Aristocrats, so we're going to be trying to ping our opponents every time we sacrifice a creature. So let's take a look at mana value 1. We have cards like Doomed Traveler and Haunted Witness that when they die, they generate a token. So we can use our commander to sacrifice this and make an extra body if we need it. We have a card called Skull Clamp that basically says whenever the equipped creature is put into a graveyard, you draw 2 cards. At mana value 2, we have Bitter Blossom. So at the beginning of our upkeep, we're going to lose a life, and we're going to create a 1/1 Black Fairy Rogue creature token with flying. So this is going to allow us to have sack targets for our commander. Then we have Blood Artist that says whenever it or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life, you can gain a life. And the cool thing about it is that it says another creature, so it doesn't really have to be our own creature. If our opponent's creature dies, we can force one of our target opponents to lose a life and we gain a life. Next, we have cards like Cruel Celebrant that says whenever it or another planeswalker or creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain a life. Then we have Elos with a similar ability. It's a 2-mana Death Toucher that says whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life. And then whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life. Then we have Feast of the Victorious Dead that says at the beginning of our end step, if one or more creatures die this turn, you gain that much life and you get to distribute that many 1/1 counters among creatures you control. Next, we have Latho Corrupt Sharif. That basically says whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, so it's not only you, it's also your opponent. You will lose a life, but you also get to create a treasure token. Next, let's talk about Reassembling Skeleton. For 2 mana, it's a 1/1, and then for 2 mana, we can return it from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So this is good because it's going to allow us to always have a sack target as long as we can keep recurring this from the graveyard over and over again. I did have a game online where I was able to bring this back like 7 or 8 times, and I just kept draining my opponent with abilities from a card like Zulaport Cutthroat that says whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and gain a life. At mana value 3, we're going to look at Bastion of Remembrance, a 3-mana enchantment that when it ETBs, it's going to create you a token, and then whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain a life. Then we have Morbid Opportunist that says whenever one or more creatures dies, you draw a card, and this ability triggers only once each turn. But like some of our other cards, it doesn't require our creatures to be the one to die. If our opponent's creature dies on their turn, we do get to draw a card, and this is going to only happen once each turn. Next, we have Phyrexian Arena. Basically, we're going to lose a life, and we're going to draw an additional card during our upkeep. At mana value 4, we have Court of Ardenvale. When it ETBs, we become the Monarch. So as long as we're the Monarch at the end of our turn, we're going to draw an additional card. And during our upkeep, we can return target permanent from our graveyard with mana value 3 or less to your hand. But if we are the Monarch, we get to return that permanent to the battlefield instead. Next, we have Mirkwood Bats that says whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. Next, we have Pitiless Plunderer that says whenever another creature you control dies, you get to create a treasure. Then we also have Tessa Karlov, a 4-mana creature that says if a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time, and creature tokens you control have Vigilance and Lifelink. Then we have Vito, Fanatic of Alkalasats, 4-mana flyer that says whenever you sacrifice a permanent, another permanent, you gain 2 life if it's the first time this ability has resolved. If it is the second time, each opponent loses 2 life. And then if it's the third time, you create a 4/3 white and black vampire demon creature token with flying. And then for mass removal, we have Wrath of God. At mana value 5, we have the 2-card combo and Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Bond. So basically, we go infinite if these 2 are on the board. So whenever opponent loses life, you gain that much life, and then whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. For lands, we have Bojuka Bog to empty out someone's graveyard, Castle Ardenvale to create tokens, Castle Lockwain to draw cards. We have Path of Ancestry to allow us to scry if we cast a creature spell that shares a type with our commander. Then we play Restless Fortress. For 4 mana, we can animate this land. It becomes a 1/4 white and black nightmare creature token to the end of the turn. And then when it attacks, defending player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. And then lastly, Takenuma Abandoned Mire. So for 4 mana, we can channel this away to mill 3 cards and then return a creature or planeswalker from your graveyard to your hand. And this ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. So that's the deck. It's going to cost you around $234. As you can see, we curve out at 2, and that is it. So if you enjoy this style of content, please hit the subscribe button on my channel. It will be also on a little icon, my little icon on the bottom right of the screen in the video, and you have a good night.